I never thought a single phone call could unravel everything I'd spent years building. My name is Ellen, and I've been the glue holding this fractured family together, or so I thought. When I married David 8 years ago, I inherited more than a husband. I got his daughter, Lily, a sharp-edged teenager with her mother's eyes and a grudge that burned hotter than I could have imagined. Her mother, Claire, was a ghost in our home, lingering in every argument, every silence. I tried to love Lily like my own, but love, I learned, doesn't erase the past. It just buries it, waiting for the right moment to claw its way out. The trouble started 6 months ago when Lily announced her engagement. She was 23, radiant with that reckless certainty youth brings, and her fiancé, Mark, was the kind of man who made you believe in second chances, steady, kind, the opposite of her father's fire. David and I were thrilled, or at least I was, until Lily cornered me in the kitchen one evening. Her voice was low, almost a hiss, as she said, "Ellen, I need you to understand something. You're not invited to the wedding. It's for Mom's sake." Her words hit like a slap, sharp and cold, and I stood there, gripping the counter, trying to make sense of them. Claire had been gone for a decade, lost to a car accident when Lily was 13, but her shadow still dictated the terms of our lives. I wanted to scream, to demand why, but Lily's eyes were steel, and I knew better than to push. I nodded, swallowing the hurt, and she walked away, leaving me to wonder what I'd done to deserve this. That night, I lay awake next to David, his snores steady while my mind churned. Lily's words weren't just about a wedding. They were a verdict, a declaration that I'd never truly belonged. I'd spent years playing the peacemaker, smoothing over her tantrums, her accusations that I was trying to replace Claire. I'd cooked her favorite meals, sat through her school plays, even paid for her college when David's business tanked. But none of it mattered. To her, I was the interloper, the woman who dared to step into her mother's place. I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with a mix of anger and grief. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. God, I tried. And now, to be erased from the most important day of her life felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of everything I'd poured into this family. The next morning, I found David in the garage, tinkering with his old motorcycle, the one he swore he'd fix someday. I told him what Lily said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. He froze, wrench in hand, and looked at me with that weary expression he got when Claire's name came up. "She's just grieving, Ellen," he said, like that explained everything. "She doesn't mean it." But I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the same doubt I felt. He promised to talk to her, but I knew David. He avoided conflict like it was a disease, especially when it came to Lily. I left the garage feeling more alone than ever, the weight of her words pressing harder. I wasn't invited. For her mom's sake. The phrase echoed, taunting me, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at her table, but I wasn't going to let this go, either. Days turned into weeks, and the wedding plans consumed the house. Lily was a whirlwind, showing off fabric swatches and seating charts, but she barely looked at me. I kept busy, throwing myself into work at the library, where the quiet stacks felt like a refuge. But the hurt festered, and with it came questions I'd never dared to ask. Why was Claire's memory so sacred? Why did Lily cling to her like a martyr? I started digging, not out of petite least, that's what I told myself, but because I needed to understand. I found Claire's old journals in the attic, tucked in a box David thought I'd never open. The pages were filled with her elegant scrawl, detailing her life with David, her love for Lily, and, to my shock, her doubts about their marriage. She wrote about fights, about David's late nights at work, about feeling like she was losing him. I read until my eyes burned, each word a revelation. Claire wasn't the saint Lily painted her to be. She was human, flawed, just like me. One entry stopped me cold. Claire mentioned a man named Paul, someone she met at her art gallery job. She described him as a friend, but the way she wrote about their conversations, their shared coffees, felt too intimate. My stomach twisted. Was this why Lily was so protective of her mother's memory? Did she know something I didn't? I closed the journal, my hands trembling. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I couldn't stop now. I needed answers, not just for me, but for the family I'd fought so hard to hold together. I started asking around, discreetly. Old friends of Claire's, neighbors who'd known her. Most were kind but vague, offering platitudes about her warmth, her talent. But one woman, a former coworker named Susan, hesitated when I mentioned Paul. He was around a lot, she said, her voice careful. Claire said he understood her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Paul. The name felt like a key to a lock I hadn't known existed. I didn't tell David about the journals or my questions. He was already walking on eggshells, trying to keep peace between me and Lily. But the more I learned, the more I felt a fire growing inside me. Lily's rejection wasn't just personal, it was a judgment, a punishment for sins I hadn't committed. I wasn't Claire, and I never would be, but I deserved better than this. I started watching Lily more closely, noticing the way she'd stiffen when I entered a room, the way she'd whisper to Mark when she thought I wasn't listening. I wasn't proud of it, but I began to resent her. Her wedding, her perfect day, felt like a stage where I'd been written out of the script. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this, something buried deeper than grief or loyalty. One evening, I found Lily's phone on the kitchen counter, left behind in her rush to meet Mark. I don't know what possessed me, maybe it was the journals, maybe it was the months of being sidelined, but I picked it up. Her passcode was her birthday, a detail I'd learned years ago when I set up her first phone. I scrolled through her texts, my heart pounding. Most were mundane, wedding plans and jokes with friends. But then I saw a thread with an unknown number. "You sure about this?" The message read. "It's not too late to tell her." Lily's reply was curt. "No, she doesn't get to know." My breath caught. Know what? I scrolled further, but the thread was vague, maddeningly so. I set the phone down, my mind racing. Was this about me? About Claire? Or something else entirely? I didn't have answers, but I had a name. Paul. And I had a growing sense that whatever Lily was hiding, it was the key to everything. By the time David got home, I was a mess, pacing the living room. I told him about the texts, leaving out how I'd found them. He looked at me like I was losing it, his voice gentle but firm. "Ellen, you're reading too much into this." Lily stressed. "Let it go," but I couldn't. Letting it go meant accepting my place as the outsider, the one who didn't belong. I'd spent years swallowing my pride, but this was different. This was a fight for my place in this family, for the truth I'd been denied. I didn't know it then, but that phone, that single moment of weakness, would set off a chain of events I couldn't control. A call was coming, one that would change everything. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and silence. I couldn't look at Lily without seeing those texts, their cryptic words looping in my mind. She doesn't get to know. Who was she? Me? Claire? Someone else entirely? I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but every time I opened my mouth, I saw David's tired eyes, his unspoken plea to keep the peace. So I kept quiet, letting the questions fester like an untreated wound. Work became my escape, the library's orderly shelves a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial, something that would explain why Lily had shut me out so completely. I started digging deeper into Claire's past, driven by a mix of curiosity and something darker, anger, maybe, or the need to prove I wasn't the villain Lily seemed to think I was. I tracked down Paul through an old address book Claire had left behind, its pages yellowed and brittle. His full name was Paul Whitaker, an artist who'd exhibited at Claire's gallery years ago. A quick search online revealed he still lived in town, running a small studio downtown. I told myself I just wanted closure, a way to understand Claire's hold over Lily. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I wanted to know if Paul was the reason I'd never been enough. I visited his studio on a rainy Tuesday, my heart pounding as I pushed open the glass door. The place smelled of paint and turpentine, canvases leaning against every wall. Paul was older than I'd expected, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were sharp, taking me in like he'd been expecting me. "You're Ellen," he said, not a question. I nodded, caught off guard. He gestured to a stool, and I sat, feeling like I was stepping into a trap I'd set for myself. "I figured you'd come eventually," he said, his voice low, almost kind. "Claire talked about you. Before she died." My stomach dropped. Claire had died years before I met David. How could she have known about me? Paul saw my confusion and smiled, a sad, knowing thing. She knew David was moving on. She felt it, even back then. He told me about their friendship, how it started innocently shared lunches, late-night talks about art. But it grew into something more, something Claire never acted on but couldn't ignore. She loved David, Paul said, but she wasn't happy. And Lily, she knew her mom wasn't herself. Kids pick up on things. I listened, my hands clenched in my lap, trying to piece it together. Claire had been unhappy, maybe even unfaithful in her heart, but Lily had turned her into a saint. Why? Paul didn't have answers, but he gave me something else, a letter Claire had written to him, never sent. It was short, just a page, but it was raw, full of guilt over her feelings, over the life she was failing to live for Lily. I'm breaking her, Claire wrote. She deserves better than me. I left the studio clutching that letter, my mind spinning. Claire wasn't perfect. She was a woman, struggling, just like I was. But Lily didn't know that. Or did she? Back home, I hid the letter in my nightstand, afraid David would find it, afraid of what it would do to him. He'd always spoken of Claire with reverence, like she was the love he'd never recover from. I'd accepted that, made peace with being the practical choice, the one who picked up the pieces. But now I wasn't so sure. If Claire had been unfaithful, even emotionally, what did that mean for David's grief? For Lily's loyalty? I wanted to tell him, to lay it all bare, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I watched Lily, searching for cracks in her armor. She was planning her wedding with a fervor that felt almost desperate, as if she could outrun her own doubts. I noticed the way she'd glance at her phone, her fingers hesitating before typing. I wondered if she was still texting that unknown number, still guarding whatever secret she didn't want her to know. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. David was out, and Lily was in her old room, sorting through wedding favors. I knocked, my heart in my throat. "Can we talk?" I asked. She looked up, her expression guarded but not hostile. "Progress, maybe." I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "I know you don't want me at the wedding," I said. "I just want to understand why." She froze, her hands stilling on a pile of ribbons. For a moment, I thought she'd open up, let me in. But then her face hardened. "It's not about you, Ellen," she said, her voice clipped. "It's about Mom. She'd want to be there, and you. You're not her." The words stung, but they also confused me. Claire was gone. How could my presence take anything away from her? I pressed, gently at first, then harder. "Lily, what aren't you telling me? I found your mom's journals. I know about Paul." Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw fear. Then she stood, her voice shaking. "You had no right. Get out." I left her room, my pulse racing. I'd crossed a line, but I'd also seen something in her reaction: guilt, maybe, or shame. She knew something about Claire, something she was protecting. I went to my room, pulled out the letter, and read it again. Claire's words were a confession, but they were also a plea for forgiveness. She hadn't wanted to hurt Lily. She'd wanted to be better. I realized then that Lily's rejection wasn't just about me. It was about her own fear of betraying her mother's memory, of facing the truth about who Claire had been. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, thinking about Paul, about Claire, about the family I tried to build. I didn't know how to fix this, but I knew I couldn't let it go. Not now. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Susan, Claire's old coworker, and asked her to meet me. She agreed, reluctantly, and we met at a coffee shop across town. She looked nervous, her fingers twisting around her mug. "What do you want to know?" she asked. I told her about the journals, about Paul, about Lily's texts. Her face paled. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire wasn't just unhappy. She was planning to leave David. For Paul. My heart stopped. Susan went on, explaining how Claire had confided in her, how she'd been torn between her love for Lily and her need to escape a marriage that was suffocating her. But before she could decide, the accident happened. Lily had been in the car, too, but survived. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Lily blames herself. She thinks if she hadn't fought with Claire that day, her mom would still be alive. I drove home in a daze, Susan's words echoing. Lily wasn't just grieving. She was carrying a guilt I couldn't imagine, a burden that made her cling to Claire's memory like a lifeline. I didn't know how to reach her, but I knew I had to try. That night, I found her in the backyard, staring at the stars. I sat beside her, silent for a long time. Then I said, "I'm not trying to replace your mom, Lily. I just want to be here for you." She didn't respond, but she didn't leave, either. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I didn't know it then, but a call was coming, one that would force us to face the truth, whether we were ready or not. The revelation about Claire's plan to leave David changed everything. It was like finding a missing piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. Lily's anger, her fierce loyalty to her mother, it wasn't just grief. It was guilt, layered with the fear that her mother's memory was built on a lie. I wanted to tell David, to share the weight of what I'd learned, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. He'd spent years mourning Claire as the perfect wife, the love he'd lost too soon. Telling him she'd been on the verge of leaving would break him. Or maybe it would break us. So I kept it to myself, carrying the secret like a stone in my chest. Lily, meanwhile, was a fortress. After our confrontation in her room, she avoided me, her silence louder than any argument. I saw her whispering to Mark, her eyes darting to me when she thought I wasn't looking. I wondered what she was telling him, whether he knew about Claire, about Paul, about whatever she was hiding. The wedding was 3 months away, and the house felt like a pressure cooker, every conversation laced with tension. David tried to play mediator, but his efforts were half-hearted, his own guilt over Claire's death making him tiptoe around Lily's pain. I was alone in this, and the loneliness was starting to feel like a betrayal of its own. I kept going back to Claire's letter, rereading it until the words blurred. "I'm breaking her," she'd written about Lily. I understood now what she meant. Claire had been unraveling, torn between her love for her daughter and her own desperate need for freedom. Lily must have sensed it, even as a child. Kids always do. They feel the cracks in their parents' lives long before they understand them. I wondered if Lily had known about Paul, if that was the secret she was guarding. I wanted to ask her, to force her to talk, but I knew it would only push her further away. Instead, I decided to focus on Paul. If he knew Claire's plans, maybe he knew more, something that could help me reach Lily. I went back to his studio, this time unannounced. He was painting, his hands steady despite the surprise in his eyes when he saw me. "You're persistent," he said, setting his brush down. I didn't waste time. I told him what Susan had said, about Claire's plan to leave. His face softened, and for a moment, I saw the man Claire must have cared for, gentle, thoughtful, but haunted. "She never made a decision," he said. "She loved Lily too much to leave her. But she was drowning, Ellen." David didn't see it, but she was. He told me about the accident, how Claire had been distracted that day, arguing with Lily about something trivial. "Lily thinks it's her fault," he said. "She's been carrying that since she was 13. I left the studio feeling heavier than before. Lily's guilt wasn't just about Claire's death, it was about the fight, the last words they'd exchanged. I thought about my own fights with Lily, the way I'd pushed her, accused her of shutting me out. I hadn't known how deep her pain ran. I drove home, my mind a tangle of regret and determination. I had to find a way to reach her, to show her I wasn't the enemy. But how do you convince someone to let you in when they're holding onto a ghost? That night, I found Lily in the kitchen, making tea. It was late, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I took a chance. I talked to Paul, I said, keeping my voice soft. She froze, the spoon clattering against the mug. "Why can't you leave it alone?" she whispered, her voice raw. I stepped closer, ignoring the instinct to back away. "Because I care about you, Lily. I know you're hurting, and I know it's not just about me." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger, fear, maybe, or vulnerability. "You don't know anything," she said, but her voice cracked, and she turned away, gripping the counter. I didn't push. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I heard them fighting. The day she died. Mom was crying, saying she couldn't do it anymore. I didn't know what she meant, but I was mad. I told her I hated her." Her shoulders shook, and I realized she was crying. I wanted to hug her, to tell her it wasn't her fault, but I stayed still, afraid to break the moment. "She got in the car right after," Lily continued. "I was supposed to go with her, but I didn't. And then..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Lily, your mom loved you. Whatever was going on with her, it wasn't your fault." She shook her head, tears falling faster. "You don't get it. I can't let her down again. That's why you can't be at the wedding. It's her day too." I understood then. The wedding wasn't just about Lily and Mark. It was about Claire, about proving her love for the mother she thought she'd failed. I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't trying to take Claire's place, but I saw the pain in her eyes and knew words wouldn't be enough. The next day, I found David in the garage again, his hands black with grease. I told him about Lily's confession, about the fight with Claire. He listened, his face crumpling. "I didn't know," he said, his voice thick. "I thought she was just grieving." I realized then that David had been carrying his own guilt, blaming himself for not saving Claire. We were all trapped in our own versions of the past, unable to move forward. I made a decision then, one I hadn't planned. I was going to find a way to be at that wedding, not for me, but for Lily, for all of us. I started small, helping with wedding tasks. Lily didn't have time for addressing invitations, picking up decorations. She didn't thank me, but she didn't stop me, either. It was a fragile truce, but it was something. I kept Paul's letter close, a reminder of Claire's humanity, her flaws. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between me and Lily, but I knew I couldn't give up. Not now, not when I was starting to understand her pain. I didn't expect the call that came next, the one that would force us all to face the truth. But it was coming, and it would change everything. The weeks slipped by, each day a delicate dance around Lily's pain and my own resolve. I kept helping with the wedding, folding napkins, arranging centerpieces, anything to stay close without pushing too hard. Lily tolerated me, her silence less hostile, but still heavy. David noticed the shift, his eyes softening when he saw us working side by side. But he didn't comment. He was trying to hold us together, just like I was. But we both knew the cracks were deep. Claire's shadow loomed larger as the wedding approached, her absence a weight we all carried differently. I thought about her letter often, its words a quiet reminder that she'd been human, not a saint. I wanted Lily to see that, to let go of the guilt that chained her to a perfect memory, but I didn't know how. One afternoon, while sorting through RSVPs, I found a name that stopped me cold, Paul Whitaker. He'd been invited. My hands shook as I stared at the card, his neat handwriting confirming he'd attend. Lily hadn't mentioned him, and I hadn't told her about my visits to his studio. Why was he coming? Did she know about his connection to Claire? I wanted to ask, but the memory of her tears in the kitchen held me back. Instead, I tucked the card away, my mind racing. Paul's presence at the wedding could mean anything, a gesture of closure, a provocation, or something I couldn't yet grasp. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way. That evening, I found Lily in the backyard, stringing fairy lights for the reception. The air was warm, the kind of summer evening that made you want to believe in happy endings. I took a chance. I saw Paul's RSVP. I said, keeping my tone neutral. She didn't look at me, her fingers fumbling with a knot. He was Mom's friend, she said finally, her voice flat. He deserves to be there. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Friend. The word felt like a lie, but I didn't call her on it. Instead, I helped her with the lights, our hands brushing as we worked. It was the closest we'd been in months, and for a moment, I let myself hope. But hope is a fragile thing. The next day, I overheard Lily on the phone, her voice low and urgent. No, he can't know, she said. It'll ruin everything. I froze, hidden behind the living room door, my heart pounding. Was she talking about David? About Paul? I strained to hear more, but she hung up, and when she walked into the room, I pretended to be reading. Her eyes lingered on me, suspicious, but she didn't say anything. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something bigger than Claire's unhappiness, something that could tear us apart for good. I went back to Claire's journals, searching for clues. Most were mundane grocery lists, notes about Lily's school, but one entry caught my eye. It was dated a month before the accident, a single line. I told Paul the first can't. Not yet. Not yet. The words echoed Susan's story about Claire planning to leave. Had she been close to telling David? Had Lily known? I felt like I was chasing ghosts, each answer leading to more questions. I decided to confront Paul again, but this time, I needed more than stories. I needed the truth. I found him at a local art show, his paintings vibrant against the gallery's white walls. He saw me coming inside, like he'd known I wouldn't let this go. What now, Ellen? He asked, his voice tired but not unkind. I didn't hold back. I told him about Lily's phone call, about the RSVP, about my fear that she was hiding something. He listened, his face unreadable, then said something that made my blood run cold. Lily knows about me and Claire. She's known since she was a kid. I stared at him, my mind reeling. How? I asked. He hesitated, then told me about a day Lily had come to the gallery, looking for Claire. She'd overheard them talking, heard Claire confess her feelings for Paul. She was devastated, he said. She thought her mom was betraying her dad. I drove home in a fog, Paul's words sinking in. Lily had known about Claire's feelings for Paul, had carried that secret through her mother's death and into our lives. No wonder she resented me. I was a reminder of everything she'd lost, not just her mom, but the family she thought they'd been. I wanted to tell David, to lay it all out, but I was afraid. Afraid of what it would do to him, to us. Instead, I focused on Lily. I started leaving her notes small things, like, you're going to be a beautiful bride, or, I'm here if you need me. She didn't respond, but I noticed she kept them, tucked into her planner. It wasn't much, but it was something. The wedding was 2 weeks away when the call came. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when my phone rang. It was Susan, her voice shaky. Ellen, you need to know something. It's about the accident. My heart stopped. She told me Claire hadn't been alone in the car. Paul had been with her, not Lily. He'd survived, barely, and Claire had died on impact. The police report said it was an accident, but Susan said there was more. Paul told me Claire was leaving that day, she said. She'd packed a bag. Lily was supposed to meet her, but she didn't show. I hung up, my hands trembling. Lily hadn't been in the car, but she'd been part of the plan. She'd known her mom was leaving, and she'd let her go. I didn't know what to do with this. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone, trying to make sense of it. Lily's guilt, her anger, it all came into focus. She wasn't just mourning Claire. She was punishing herself for letting her mom walk away, for not stopping her. And I was the one paying the price. I wanted to confront her, to demand why she'd kept this from David, from me. But I also wanted to hold her, to tell her she was enough, that she didn't have to carry this alone. I was torn, caught between my own hurt and the need to save her from herself. That night, I found her in the backyard again, staring at the fairy lights. I didn't plan what I said next, it just came out. Lily, I know about the accident. About Paul. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice was weak, like she knew the game was up. I took a deep breath and told her what Susan had said, watching her face crumple with every word. She didn't deny it. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time, I saw her not as my stepdaughter, but as a girl who'd lost everything and didn't know how to let it go. The call had changed everything, but the hardest part was still ahead. Lily's tears were silent, but they cut deeper than any words. We sat in the backyard, the fairy lights casting soft shadows across her face, and I waited. I didn't push, didn't ask for explanations. I'd learned by now that forcing Lily to talk was like trying to hold water in your hands that slipped away, leaving you empty. But this time, she didn't run. She sat there, her shoulders hunched, her hands twisting in her lap, and I could feel the weight of her secret pressing down on us both. The call from Susan had torn open a wound I hadn't known existed, and now, we were both bleeding. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was supposed to go with her, she said. Mom told me she was leaving Dad. She said we'd start over, just the two of us. But I was so angry. I didn't want to leave Dad, didn't want to lose our family. So I said no. I told her to go without me. Her voice broke, and she pressed her hands to her face, as if she could hide from the memory. She was crying when she left. I didn't know Paul was with her. I didn't know she'd die. I listened, my heart aching for the girl she'd been, 13 and caught in a storm she couldn't control. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it wasn't her fault, but I stayed still, letting her words fill the space between us. I found out later, she continued, her voice steadier now, about Paul. The police told Dad he was in the car, but he never told me. I had to hear it from someone else, years later. I hated her for it. For wanting to leave, for choosing him over us. But I hated myself more. If I'd gone with her, maybe she'd still be here. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I understood now why she'd shut me out, why she clung to Claire's memory. It wasn't just love, it was penance, a way to make up for the choice she'd made. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Lily, you were a kid. You couldn't have known. Your mom made her choices, and they weren't your fault. She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of trust. Why do you care? She asked, her voice raw. I've been awful to you. I swallowed, my throat tight. Because you're my family, I said. I know I'm not your mom, but I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away, either. It was a small thing, but it felt like a crack in the wall she'd built between us. We sat in silence, the night wrapping around us, and I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal. The next day, I told David about the call, about Paul, about Lily's confession. I couldn't keep it from him anymore, not when it was tearing our family apart. He listened, his face pale, his hands gripping the kitchen table. She was leaving me, he asked, his voice hollow. I nodded, hating the pain in his eyes. I showed him Claire's letter, the one she'd written to Paul, and watched as he read it, his shoulders slumping with every word. I didn't know, he said finally. I thought we were happy. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, standing to pace the room. Why didn't Lily tell me? He asked, more to himself than to me. I didn't have an answer. All I could do was sit there, feeling the weight of his grief, my own guilt for stirring this up. David didn't talk to Lily right away. He needed time, he said, to process it. But I could see the change in him, the way his eyes lingered on her, searching for the daughter he thought he knew. I kept helping with the wedding, keeping my distance but staying close enough to show I wasn't giving up. Lily was different, too quieter, less guarded. She didn't mention our talk, but she started including me in small ways, asking my opinion on flowers, showing me her dress. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. I held on to that, even as I braced for Paul's arrival at the wedding. His presence loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to undo whatever progress we'd made. A week before the wedding, I found a note on my pillow, written in Lily's neat handwriting. "I'm sorry," it said. "I don't know how to do this, but I'm trying." My heart swelled, and I tucked the note into Claire's letter, a reminder that we were both trying to find our way. I didn't know what Paul's presence would bring, but I knew I had to face it for Lily's sake and my own. I started preparing myself, mentally replaying my conversations with him, with Susan, with Lily. I wasn't sure what I was looking for: closure, maybe, or a way to prove I belonged. But I felt a shift, a determination to fight for this family, no matter what it took. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived, and with it, a nervous energy that buzzed through the house. Lily was a bundle of nerves, snapping at Mark, then apologizing, her eyes darting to me like she was afraid I'd disappear. I stayed calm, helping where I could, but my mind was on Paul. He'd RSVP'd, but I hadn't seen him yet, and the uncertainty was eating at me. I wondered if Lily had invited him to honor Claire or to confront her own guilt. I didn't ask. I just kept moving, setting tables, smiling at guests, pretending I wasn't bracing for a storm. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I saw him. Paul, standing at the edge of the room, his eyes scanning the crowd. He looked older, more tired, but there was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. Lily saw him, too, and her face went pale. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked toward him. I held my breath, my hand gripping David's under the table. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the one that could break us or bind us. Lily stopped in front of Paul, her shoulders rigid, and I saw her lips move, but I couldn't hear the words. Then she turned, her eyes finding mine, and she nodded, just once. It was small, but it was enough. I didn't know what she'd said to him, but I knew it was a step toward letting go. The dinner passed in a blur, laughter and toasts masking the undercurrent of tension. I kept my eyes on Lily, on Paul, on David, searching for signs of what would come next. I didn't know it then, but the real turning point was still ahead, waiting in a call I never saw coming. It would force us to face the truth, not just about Claire, but about ourselves. And it would change everything. The rehearsal dinner left me restless, my mind replaying Lily's nod to Paul, the way her eyes had met mine across the room. It wasn't reconciliation, not exactly, but it was something to crack in the wall she'd built around herself. I wanted to believe it meant she was starting to let me in, but doubt gnawed at me. Paul's presence was a wild card, his connection to Claire a reminder of the secrets we were all carrying. I watched him that night, mingling with guests, his smile polite but distant. He didn't approach me, and I didn't seek him out, but I felt his eyes on me, like he was waiting for something. I just didn't know what. The next morning, the house was chaos, bridesmaids rushing in and out, florists delivering bouquets, David trying to keep everyone calm. Lily was a whirlwind, her laughter brittle, but her eyes brighter than I'd seen in weeks. I stayed in the background, helping where I could, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I kept thinking about Claire's letter, about Lily's confession, about the accident that had rewritten all our lives. I wondered if Paul's presence was a test, for Lily or for me. I wanted to ask her, to know what she'd said to him, but the timing was wrong. The wedding was tomorrow, and I didn't want to ruin it with questions she wasn't ready to answer. David was struggling, too. I could see it in the way he moved, his shoulders tense, his smiles forced. I'd heard him by telling him about Claire's plan to leave, and though he hadn't said it, I knew he was questioning everything: his marriage, his daughter, even me. I tried to talk to him that afternoon, catching him alone in the garage. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He didn't look at me, his hands busy with a wrench he didn't need. "I don't know," he said finally. "I keep thinking about what you told me. About Claire. I don't know how to feel." I reached for him, but he stepped back, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "Why did you have to dig, Ellen? Why couldn't you leave it alone?" His words stung, but I understood. I'd opened a wound, and now we were all bleeding. I didn't have an answer for him, not one that would fix things. So I went back to helping with the wedding, folding programs, checking the guest list. Paul's name was still there, a quiet threat. I wondered if Lily had invited him to prove something to herself, to Claire, to David. I didn't know, and the not knowing was driving me crazy. I thought about confronting him again, but what would I say? I'd already learned more than I wanted to. Instead, I focused on Lily, watching for signs of what she was feeling. She was nervous but happy, her smile genuine when she talked to Mark. I envied their ease, the way they leaned into each other, like they could weather anything. I wanted that with Lily, with David, but it felt so far away. That evening, I found a moment alone with Lily. She was in her room, adjusting her veil in the mirror, her reflection a mix of her mother's grace and her own fierce spirit. I knocked softly, and she turned, her expression guarded but not hostile. "Can I help with anything?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded, handing me a necklace, simple gold chain with a locket. "It was Mom's," she said. "I want to wear it tomorrow." My heart ached as I fastened it around her neck, my fingers brushing her skin. "You look beautiful," I said, and I meant it. She met my eyes in the mirror, and for a moment, I thought she'd say something, maybe thank me, maybe apologize. But she just nodded, and I left, feeling the weight of all we hadn't said. The call came that night, just as I was getting ready for bed. My phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice cautious. "Ellen." It was Paul, his tone urgent. "We need to talk. Now." My stomach dropped. I glanced at David, already asleep, and slipped out of the room, my heart pounding. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He didn't waste time. "Lily called me after the rehearsal dinner. She's planning to tell David everything tomorrow, at the wedding. About Claire, about me, about the accident." I froze, my mind racing. "Why?" I asked. Paul sighed, his voice heavy. "She thinks it's the only way to let go. But it'll destroy him, Ellen. You have to stop her." I hung up, my hands shaking. Lily was going to tell David the truth, in front of everyone, on the day she was supposed to be celebrating. I understood her need for closure, but this wasn't the way. It would shatter David, maybe shatter all of us. I paced the living room, trying to think. I could confront her now, but she'd shut me out. I could tell David, but that would only make things worse. I felt trapped, caught between protecting the family I loved and respecting Lily's need to unburden herself. I didn't sleep that night, my mind spinning with scenarios, each worse than the last. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that promised joy. But I couldn't shake the dread in my chest. I watched Lily get ready, her bridesmaids fussing over her, her smile radiant but fragile. I wondered if she was really going through with it, if she'd stand up during the reception and lay bare the truth about Claire. I saw Paul arrive, his face tense, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. I wanted to talk to him, to make a plan, but there was no time. The ceremony was starting, and I was still uninvited, watching from the sidelines as Lily walked down the aisle, her arm linked with David's. She was breathtaking, her dress flowing like a dream, but all I could see was the girl who'd confessed her guilt under the stars. I stood at the back, my heart in my throat, waiting for the moment she'd break everything apart. The ceremony was perfect, every word and vow a reminder of what we were all fighting for: love, family, second chances. But as the reception began, I felt the tension building, like a storm about to break. Lily caught my eye, her expression unreadable, and I knew the moment was coming. I didn't know how to stop it, but I knew I had to try. For her, for David, for all of us. The reception was a blur of laughter, clinking glasses, and music that seemed too cheerful for the storm brewing inside me. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my eyes on Lily, waiting for the moment Paul had warned me about. She moved through the room like a vision, her white dress glowing under the fairy lights, but there was a tightness in her smile, a shadow in her eyes. David was at her side, beaming with pride, oblivious to the secret she was carrying. I wanted to pull him aside, to warn him, but what could I say? That his daughter was about to unravel his world? That the wife he'd mourned for a decade had been planning to leave him? I stayed silent, my hands clenched, praying I was wrong about what was coming. Paul was there, too, lingering near the bar, his gaze flickering between Lily and me. I caught his eye once, and he nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the call that had brought us to this moment. I still didn't know why Lily had invited him, whether it was to honor Claire or to confront her own guilt. Maybe it was both. I watched her dance with Mark, her laughter bright but brittle, and I wondered if she was steeling herself for what she planned to do. The thought made my chest ache. I wanted to protect her, to save her from the pain she was about to inflict, but I didn't know how. The toast began, and I held my breath as Lily stood, a microphone in her hand. The room quieted, all eyes on her, and I saw David's face soften, his love for her so clear it hurt to watch. She started speaking, her voice steady at first, thanking everyone for coming, for celebrating her and Mark. But then her tone shifted, her words slowing, and I felt the air change, like the moment before a lightning strike. "There's something I need to say," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. My heart stopped. This was it. I glanced at Paul, his face tense, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. I took a step forward, not sure what I'd do, but knowing I had to do something. But then Lily's eyes found mine, and she paused, her lips trembling. "I've been holding on to something for a long time," she said, her voice breaking. "Something I thought I had to keep secret, to protect my mom's memory." David's smile faltered, and I saw Mark reach for her hand, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. I wanted to run to her, to stop her, but my feet were frozen. "My mom wasn't perfect," she continued, her voice stronger now. "She made mistakes, just like we all do. And I've been punishing myself for them, for things I couldn't change." She looked at me again, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I've been unfair, especially to someone who's tried to be there for me, even when I pushed her away." The room was silent, every guest hanging on her words. I felt David's hand on my arm, his grip tight, like he was bracing for impact. Lily took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving mine. "Ellen, I was wrong. I want you here, not just today but always. I'm sorry." My throat closed, and I felt tears sting my eyes. I hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope for it. She was inviting me, not just to the wedding, but into her life. I nodded, unable to speak, and the room erupted in applause, though I barely heard it. All I could see was Lily, her face a mix of relief and fear, like she'd just jumped off a cliff and didn't know if she'd land. She didn't mention Claire's plan to leave, didn't mention Paul. Whatever she'd intended to say, she'd chosen a different path, one that didn't destroy her father. I glanced at Paul, and he gave me a small nod, his expression unreadable. I didn't know if he was relieved or disappointed, but it didn't matter. Lily had chosen healing over revenge, and that was enough. The rest of the reception passed in a haze. I danced with David, his hand warm in mine, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were a team again. Lily came to me later, her arms wrapping around me in a quick, awkward hug. "Thank you," she whispered, and I knew she meant for more than just being there. But the call from Paul still lingered, a reminder that we weren't done with the past. Later that night, as the guests thinned and the music slowed, I found him outside, staring at the stars. "She didn't tell him," I said, my voice low. He nodded, his face tired. "She's stronger than I thought," he said. "But she'll need you now, more than ever." I didn't ask what he meant. I just thanked him and walked away, feeling the weight of his words. Lily had taken a step toward forgiveness, but the road was long, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The next morning, David and I sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet now that the wedding was over. Lily and Mark were on their honeymoon, and we were alone with our thoughts. I told him about Lily's speech, about what it meant to me. He listened, his eyes soft, and then he took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said, "for shutting you out, for not seeing how hard this has been for you." I squeezed his hand, tears falling. "We're a family," I said. "We'll figure it out." And for the first time, I believed it. But the past wasn't done with us. A week later, I found a letter in the mailbox, addressed to me in Lily's handwriting. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting another apology, another step forward. Instead, it was a single page, written in a hurry. "Ellen, I need to tell you something, but I couldn't do it in person. It's about Mom, about the day she died." My hands shook as I read, the words blurring. She hadn't told David everything, but she was telling me. And what she wrote changed everything, pulling me back into the storm I thought we'd escaped. Lily's letter was a confession, raw and jagged, like she'd ripped it from her soul. "Ellen," it began, "I couldn't say this at the wedding, not with Dad there, not with everyone watching. But you deserve to know. Mom wasn't just leaving Dad that day. She was leaving me, too. She told me she needed to find herself, that she couldn't be the mother I deserved. I begged her to stay, but she said she had to go, that Paul was her way out. I hated her for it, and I hated myself for not being enough to make her stay." My hands trembled as I read, the words blurring through tears. Lily had carried this alone, a 13-year-old girl blaming herself for her mother's choices. The letter ended with a plea. "Please don't tell Dad. He can't know, but I needed you to understand why I pushed you away. I'm trying to let go, but it's hard." I sat on the couch, the letter crumpled in my lap, my mind reeling. Claire hadn't just been planning to leave David, she'd been ready to leave Lily, too. It explained so much: Lily's anger, her guilt, her need to protect Claire's memory. She wasn't just mourning her mother. She was mourning the family she thought she'd destroyed. I wanted to call her, to tell her she wasn't to blame, but she was on her honeymoon, and I didn't want to pull her back into this pain. Instead, I tucked the letter into Claire's journal, next to the one she'd written to Paul. They felt like two sides of the same story, one Lily and I were still trying to understand. David noticed my quietness that week, his his eyes searching mine when he thought I wasn't looking. I didn't tell him about the letter, not yet. He was still processing Claire's plan to leave, and this would only deepen his hurt. But keeping it from him felt like a betrayal, too, like I was choosing Lily's secret over our marriage. I tried to focus on the small victories: Lily's speech at the wedding, the hug she'd given me, the fragile trust we were building. But the letter was a weight, a reminder that the past wasn't finished with us. I wondered if Paul knew, if that was why he'd warned me about Lily's plan to tell David. I thought about calling him, but what would I say? He'd already given me more than I'd expected. A few days later, I went back to the library, seeking the comfort of routine. But even there, I couldn't escape the questions. I found myself searching for Claire's old gallery records, anything that might shed light on her relationship with Paul. I didn't find much, just a few exhibition catalogs, her name listed as curator. But one photo caught my eye: Claire and Paul at an opening, their smiles bright but strained, Lily standing between them, her face sullen. It was dated a month before the accident. I stared at it, trying to see what Lily had seen, what had made her so angry. I realized then that she'd known about Paul even before Claire's confession, had felt the shift in her mother's heart long before it was spoken. I took the photo home, unsure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to show it to Lily, to ask her what she remembered, but I didn't want to reopen her wounds. Instead, I slipped it into the journal, another piece of the puzzle. The house felt empty without Lily, her absence a reminder of how much I'd come to care for her, despite everything. I missed her sharp edges, her guarded smiles, even her silences. I wanted her to come home, to sit with me under the fairy lights and talk, really talk. But I knew she needed time, and I was learning to be patient. David and I were trying, too. We talked more, not just about Claire but about us, about the years we'd spent navigating her ghost. He admitted he'd been unfair, leaning on me to fix things while he hid from the pain. "I didn't see how much you were carrying," he said one night, his hand warm in mine. I told him about Lily's speech, about how it felt to hear her say she wanted me there. I didn't mention the letter, but I promised myself I would, when the time was right. We were rebuilding, slowly, and it felt like enough for now. Then Paul called again. It was late, the house dark except for the glow of my phone. "Ellen, I'm leaving town," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I wanted you to know, in case Lily needs me. I'm not running, but I think it's better this way." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved, was a reminder of Claire's betrayal, a complication we didn't need. But another part felt a pang of loss, like he was taking a piece of Claire with him. "Does Lily know?" I asked. He hesitated. "I told her after the wedding. She asked me to go." My heart sank. Lily had faced him, had made that choice, and she hadn't told me. I thanked Paul, hung up, and sat in the dark, wondering what else she was keeping from me. When Lily and Mark returned from their honeymoon, the house came alive again. She was tanned and happy, her laughter filling the rooms. But I saw the shadow in her eyes, the weight of the letter she'd sent. I waited for her to bring it up, but she didn't, and I didn't push. Instead, I invited her to dinner, just the two of us. She hesitated, then agreed, and we went to a quiet restaurant downtown. We talked about her trip, about Mark, about anything but Claire. It was easy, almost normal, and for a moment, I let myself believe we'd moved past the pain. But then she reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "I meant what I said at the wedding," she said, her voice soft. "I want you here. But it's hard, Ellen. Knowing what Mom did, what I did, it's hard to let go." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know," I said, "but you don't have to do it alone." She smiled, a real smile, and I felt something shift, like a knot loosening in my chest. We weren't fixed, not yet, but we were trying. And that was enough. Dinner with Lily was a turning point, a fragile bridge between us. We didn't talk about Claire again that night, but her presence lingered, a quiet undercurrent in every pause. I went home feeling lighter, like I'd reclaimed a piece of the family I'd fought for. David noticed, his smile soft as he kissed me goodnight. "You're good for her," he said, and I wanted to believe him. But Lily's letter was still there, tucked away in Claire's journal, a reminder that we weren't done with the past. I didn't know how to bring it up, or if I should. Part of me wanted to let it lie, to focus on the future, but another part knew we couldn't move forward until we faced it all. The next week was quiet, the post-wedding calm settling over the house. Lily and Mark were settling into their new apartment, but she came by often, her visits less guarded, her smiles more genuine. I cherished those moments, the way she'd linger in the kitchen, asking about my day or sharing stories about Mark's terrible cooking. It felt like we were building something new, something stronger than before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still on borrowed time, that the truth about Claire was waiting to resurface. I decided to talk to David about the letter. It was a risk, but keeping it from him felt like a lie, and I was tired of secrets. I found him in the garage, his sanctuary, the motorcycle still unfinished after all these years. I sat on a stool, the letter in my pocket, and told him everything: Lily's confession, Claire's plan to leave her, too, the weight she'd carried since she was 13. He listened, his face unreadable, his hands still on the wrench. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring at the floor. She was going to take Lily? He asked finally, his voice raw. I nodded, my heart aching for him. She didn't, though, I said. She loved Lily. She just didn't know how to stay. David stood, pacing the small space, his hands running through his hair. I failed her, he said. Both of them. I didn't see how unhappy she was. I stood, reaching for him, and this time, he didn't pull away. You didn't fail, I said. You love them. And you're here now, for Lily, for me. He held me then, his arms tight, and I felt the weight of his grief, his guilt, mingling with my own. We stood there, in the dim light of the garage, and I knew we'd survive this, but it would take time. I didn't tell Lily I'd shared her letter with David. It felt like a betrayal, but I needed him to understand, to be part of this healing. Instead, I focused on her, inviting her over for coffee, helping her with small things in her new life. She was trying, I could see it, but there was still a distance, a hesitation in her eyes. I wondered if she was waiting for me to bring up the letter, to acknowledge what she'd shared. I wanted to, but I didn't know how without pushing her away again. So I waited, hoping she'd come to me when she was ready. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced, her face pale, her hands clutching a small box. I found this in Mom's things, she said, setting it on the kitchen table. Inside were letters, photos, mementos of Claire's life, some from her childhood, some from her marriage to David, a few from her time with Paul. I recognized his handwriting on one, a short note thanking her for a painting. Lily's hands shook as she sorted through them, her voice quiet. I thought I knew her, she said. But I didn't. Not really. I sat beside her, looking at the pieces of Claire's life, and I realized we were both trying to understand a woman who'd been gone too long to explain herself. We spent hours going through the box, Lily sharing memories, me listening, sometimes adding my own stories about the years after Claire. It was the first time we'd talked about her without anger, without guilt. I told her about the letter I'd found, the one Claire wrote to Paul, and how it showed her love for Lily, even in her darkest moments. Lily listened, her eyes wet, and when we finished, she hugged me, a real hug, not the awkward one from the wedding. I'm glad you're here, she said, and I felt tears sting my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was close. That night, I lay awake, thinking about Claire, about Lily, about the family we were becoming. I realized I'd been fighting for a place that was already mine, not because of Claire or David, but because of Lily. She'd let me in, not all the way, but enough to make me believe we could heal. I thought about Paul, about his decision to leave, and I wondered if he'd found his own peace. I hoped so. He'd been part of Claire's story, but he wasn't part of ours, not anymore. The next morning, I found David in the kitchen, making coffee, a rare smile on his face. Lily called, he said. She wants us to come over for dinner tomorrow. I smiled, my heart lifting. It was small, but it was a step, a sign that we were moving forward. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like we were a family, not perfect, not whole, but real. The letter was still there, a reminder of the pain we'd faced, but it was also a reminder of the truth we'd found, together. Dinner at Lily and Mark's apartment was a quiet triumph. The table was set with mismatched plates, the food simple but warm, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged. Lily was nervous, her laughter quick and her hands fidgety, but her smile was real, and when she looked at me, there was no shadow of resentment. David was lighter, too, his jokes easier, his hand finding mine under the table. Mark, steady as ever, kept the conversation flowing, asking about our lives, our plans, as if we were any family, not one stitched together by loss and secrets. I watched Lily, her face glowing in the candlelight, and I saw Claire in her, not the saint, not the ghost, but the woman who'd loved her fiercely, flaws and all. We didn't talk about the letter, or Claire, or Paul. We didn't need to. The box of mementos was still in the kitchen, a quiet acknowledgement of the past, but it didn't dominate the night. Instead, we talked about the future, Lily's new job, Mark's promotion, the house David and I were thinking of renovating. It was ordinary, beautifully so, and I held on to every moment, knowing how hard we'd fought to get here. When we left, Lily hugged me again, her arms tight, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I just nodded, my heart full. The drive home was quiet, David's hand on my knee, the radio playing softly. I thought about the call from Paul, the one that had set this all in motion, and I realized it wasn't just about Lily's confession or Claire's truth. It was about us, all of us, choosing to face the pain instead of running from it. I'd spent years trying to prove I belonged, fighting for a place in a family that carried Claire's ghost. But I'd learned something through all of this. Belonging wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something new, something stronger, on its ruins. When we got home, I pulled out Claire's journal one last time, not to read it, but to put it away. I didn't need it anymore. The letter from Lily, the one that had changed everything, was tucked inside, a reminder of the truth we'd faced together. I slid the journal into a box in the attic, next to Claire's old address book, the photo from the gallery, the pieces of her life that had shaped ours. I didn't need to carry them anymore, but I wouldn't forget them, either. They were part of our story, just as I was. The next day, I called Lily, just to check in. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright. "I was just thinking about you," she said, and I smiled, feeling the warmth of her words. We talked about nothing important: recipes, weekend plans, the weather, but it felt like everything. I realized then that we were healing, not just from Claire's death, but from the ways we'd hurt each other, the ways we'd let guilt and fear define us. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was enough. David and I started making plans, too, not just for the house, but for us. We talked about taking a trip, just the two of us, somewhere quiet where we could remember who we were before the weight of Claire's memory. I didn't know if Lily would ever tell him the full truth about her mother's plans, but I knew I'd be there when she did, ready to hold them both through the fallout. For now, we were finding our way, one small step at a time. Months later, Lily sent me a photo of her and Mark, laughing in their new backyard, a dog at their feet. "Come visit," she wrote, and I did, bringing David, bringing the family we'd become. We sat under their fairy lights, the same ones from the wedding, and I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. Claire was still there, in Lily's smile, in David's quiet moments, but she wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a memory, a part of us, but not all of us. I thought about the call that had started it all, Paul's warning, Lily's letter, the truths we'd faced. It had changed everything, not because it erased the pain, but because it showed us we could carry it together. I looked at Lily, at David, at the life we were building, and I knew I'd fight for it, always. Not for Claire's sake, not for revenge, but for love, for family, for the chance to be whole.